Throughout the history of Great Britain, there have been several ethnic groups that have settled in the current English territories, and that therefore have influenced not only the language, but also the culture that the English people share. But have you ever wondered which were the first people that reached these territories? Let's look into the first group that arrived to the British Isles, the Celts. What we know about the Celts is that they were a tribe that originated in Central Europe and traveled to the West Territories later on. They gradually settled in the Isles between 500 and 100 BC. Since the Celts left no written records in their early years of existence, we have to rely on archaeological remains and the testimony of the Romans and the Greeks, who referred to the Celts as Celti or Keltoi, words that mean barbarians. When it comes to the language, we know that in the 5th century there were 5 main Celtic languages, and 4 of them are still used nowadays in the Celtic nations. But sadly, not many words from Celtic are still present in English. Some examples of Celtic words are the word bean, some city names like Cornwall, and also a big part of river name. However, there are some grammatical features that are worth mentioning. For example, the use of the auxiliary verb do in English when doing questions.
The conquest of Britannia started in the year 43 CE, commanded by Emperor Claudius. The Roman Empire ruled in Britannia for more than 3 centuries. Despite the Celtic army was quite powerful, they managed to defeat them. Afterwards, due to the incessant attacks of the Celts and the barbarians, in 122 CE, Emperor Hadrian built a 170-kilometer wall located in the east-west coast of the country. In our days, it's known as Hadrian's Wall. A Romanized lifestyle was more common in the southern cities, and this could be seen in the clothing, theaters, roads, currency, and proper towns. But during this period, Latin influence was not very noticeable. This process of Roman influence is divided into 3 periods. The Zero period, continental borrowing. Despite of fighting against each other, the relations between the Germanic and the Romans were peaceful sometimes. That commercialization between them made easier the process of sharing language and cultural aspects. The first period, Latin through Celtic transmission. During this period, the influence of Latin in English was almost non-existent, and when the Roman Empire left England, it almost disappeared. This happened because Latin was spoken only by upper classes. There was one word that truly entered into the language, "caster," a military camp. Nowadays, this word appears as a suffix in more than 50 places like Leicester, Manchester, or Winchester. The second period, the Christianization of Britain. This is considered a period in which Latin influences Old English the most. There are 2 main sources where Christianity was brought into England: the missionaries that came from the north of Ireland and St. Augustine and his monks. That was not an easy task, because the Christian philosophy was quite the opposite to the Germanic. That ended in the massive construction of churches and the introduction of Latin as the language of the religion, administration, and law for the Anglo-Saxons. Nowadays, we can see Latin influence in our vocabulary, with words that were influence of the Christianization, like angel, candle, pope, rule, oyster, pine, or school.
The history of the English language also started with the arrival of 3 Germanic tribes who invaded Britain during the 5th century AD. They came in hordes. These tribes, the Anglo-Saxon and Jutes, crossed the North Sea from what today is Denmark and northern Germany. At that time, the inhabitants of Britons, spoke a Celtic language. They were pushed west and north by the invaders, mainly into what is now Wales, Scotland, and Ireland. Those who stayed became the slaves and were forced to adopt many of their customs and learn to speak their languages. The words be, strong, and water, for example, derive from Old English. The words England and English are derived from the name of the Angles. The Anglo-Saxons and Jutes spoke different dialects of the West Germanic language. from which modern English was developed. The earliest written records are incomprehensible to the speaker of modern English. Part of Beowulf, a poem written in Old English. Anglo-Saxons divided Britain into 7 kingdoms: Wessex, Essex, Sussex, Northumbria, Kent, Mercia, and East Anglia. 4 dialects were spoken in these 7 kingdoms: the Northumbrian, northeast of England; the Mercian, between the Humber and the Thames; the West Saxon, to the south of the Thames. The Kentish was the language of the Jutes. The Anglo-Saxons and Jutes were pagans. Nonetheless, when people learned to divide up the time into weeks, they named them after the gods of the Anglo-Saxons, which were Tu, Tuesco, god of darkness; Woden, god of war; Thor, the thunderer; Freya, goddess of prosperity, which gave as a result the names Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday.